The sound wasn't loud. That was what made it worse. It slipped through the fog like a breath taken too close to my ear. Wet, dragging, wrong. Not a wave. Not a gull. Something heavier. Something patient. I froze at the edge of Pier 9, clipboard pressed to my chest, pen hovering uselessly above damp paper. The harbor lights flickered behind me, their reflections breaking apart on the black water. Midnight in Barrows Reach Harbor always felt hollow, like the world had stepped out for a smoke and forgotten to come back. Then the water moved. Not a splash. Not a ripple. It parted. The surface folded inward as if something beneath it had inhaled. I took a step back. My boots scraped wood. The sound stopped. For a long second, nothing happened. Fog thickened. The harbor held its breath. Then a shape rose just enough to disturb the moonlight. Too smooth to be driftwood, too slow to be a wave. I couldn't make out details. Just mass. Dark. Waiting. My radio crackled. "You still there?" I opened my mouth to answer. That was when something whispered my name from the water. By the time I reached my truck, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat there with the engine off, headlights dark, listening to the harbor breathe behind me. That was the only way I could describe it. Not waves. Not wind. A slow, steady intake and release, like lungs working underwater. I didn't drive home right away. I couldn't. The smell of salt clung to my clothes, sharp and metallic, like blood left too long in the open air. When I finally started the engine, the sound felt obscene, too loud, too alive, like I was interrupting something that had been waiting for silence. All the way home, I kept checking the rearview mirror. Nothing followed me. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the water parting again. How it hadn't splashed or surged, just opened as if it recognized me. As if it knew I was watching. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was exhaustion. Stress. Harbor myths getting under my skin. Barrows Reach lived on stories like that. You couldn't grow up near the water without learning how to lie to yourself. I went back that night anyway. The harbor looked normal at first. Too normal. Fishing boats rocked gently in their slips. Sodium lights buzzed overhead. Gulls screamed and settled again. The tide chart showed nothing unusual. But the air felt heavier. Fog drifted low over the water, thick enough to blur the far docks into pale smears of light. Sounds didn't travel right. Footsteps felt muted, like the pier was absorbing them. I made my rounds slowly, clipboard tucked under my arm, boots thudding against damp planks. Every step felt like a question I didn't want answered. That's when I noticed the silence. No lapping water. No clink of rigging. No gulls. Just the hum of the lights and my own breathing. I stopped near Pier 9. The water beneath it was blacker than the rest of the harbor, as if the light refused to stay there. I leaned over the railing, peering down, heart thudding. Nothing. Still, the feeling didn't leave. The sense of being watched, measured, weighed. Like something beneath the surface was waiting for me to make a mistake. I forced myself to move on. At the fuel shed, my radio crackled softly, then went quiet. I tapped it against my palm. Static whispered back, low and restless. "Mark," I said. No answer. I logged minor maintenance issues, locked the shed, and turned toward the storage area. That's when I saw the footprints. They started at the water's edge. Not leading into it. Leading away. The wood was wet where they passed. Darker than the surrounding planks. The shapes were wrong. Too long, too shallow, like whatever made them hadn't pressed down with weight, just contact. I followed them without realizing I was doing it. Each step pulled me farther from the lights. Deeper into the fog. The storage sheds loomed ahead, old and hunched, their corrugated walls streaked with rust. The footprints ended at the door of the farthest one, the net shed no one used anymore. The lock hung open. I stood there longer than I should have, listening. The harbor had gone completely still again, like it was holding its breath. I told myself not to open the door. I did anyway. The smell hit me first. stale seawater and something else underneath it, something sour and old. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, shaking slightly as I swept it across the room. Nets hung from hooks like shed skins. Floats knocked together softly, though there was no wind. Then the light landed on the wall. The wood was gouged, not scratched, deep deliberate grooves carved straight through layers of paint and rot. The letters were uneven, jagged, like they'd been made with something that didn't quite understand hands. Still working late. My mouth went dry. The radio on my belt hissed. I backed out of the shed slowly, never turning my back on the message, and shut the door. The lock swung uselessly, tapping once against the metal. Tap. I walked faster after that. Too fast. My boots slipped once, and I almost went down. The idea of touching the pier with my hands made bile rise in my throat. When I reached the guard office, the lights inside were already on. That stopped me cold. I was alone on shift. I always was. The door stood open. "Hello?" I called. No answer. Inside, the air felt damp, colder than it should have been. Papers on the desk were scattered, like someone had gone through them in a hurry. The tide charts were missing. My radio crackled again. "Don't," a voice whispered. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't anyone I knew. The lights flickered. Somewhere outside, beneath the pier, something tapped slowly against the wood. Testing it, counting. I realized then that the footprints weren't fresh. They were waiting. And whatever had come out of the water already knew my schedule. After the message appeared in the net shed, I stopped pretending things would go back to normal. I still showed up for my shifts. That was the worst part. Some instinct, pride, routine, or something darker, kept pulling me back to the harbor even as every rational part of me screamed to stay away. The docks felt different now, like they recognized me. Like I'd crossed some invisible line simply by noticing what lived beneath them. The footprints never appeared again. That didn't comfort me. It meant whatever made them no longer needed to walk. I began to notice smaller things. The kind you'd miss if you weren't already afraid. Ropes coiled differently than I'd left them. Knots I didn't remember tying. Nets damp even on dry nights. Once, I found a buoy floating loose in the harbor, its chain severed clean through, as if something had unhooked it carefully rather than broken it. The waterline along the pier crept higher every night, just a little. Enough to wet the planks. Enough to leave stains shaped like hands gripping the wood. When I asked Mark about it again, he shut the office door before answering. "You need to stop paying attention," he said. "That's not an answer." His jaw tightened. "It's the only one that matters." I pressed him, told him about the message, the radio voice, the tapping. He stared at the floor for a long time. "You ever hear about the ledger?" he asked quietly. "No, course not." A dry laugh. "Town doesn't like remembering." He told me Barrow's Reach used to run harder than it does now. Longer shifts. Fewer rules. Men worked until they dropped. When storms rolled in, ships went out anyway. Cargo had to move. Fish had to be hauled. Schedules mattered more than people. And when men went missing? I asked. Mark swallowed. The harbor kept count. The ledger wasn't a book, not exactly. It was a belief. An understanding passed quietly between dockmasters and captains. The water took lives, but it gave prosperity in return. Good seasons. Safe passages. Calm tides. All it asked for was time. They'd say the harbor remembers who stays late, Mark said. Who gives more than they should. A cold thought slid into place. Why me? He finally looked at me then. His eyes were rimmed red. Because you listen. After that conversation, the harbor began talking more. Whispers slid through the fog while I made my rounds. Half-formed sentences. Familiar tones twisted just enough to feel wrong. I'd hear my ex-wife's voice calling my name from the water, soft and disappointed. I'd hear my father, dead 10 years, clearing his throat behind me. I stopped responding, but silence didn't protect me. It only made the voices bolder. One night, I found an old man sitting at the end of Pier 7. He wore a fisherman's coat stiff with salt, hood pulled low over his face. I hadn't seen him arrive. I would have noticed. "You shouldn't be out here," I said. He didn't turn. "Neither should you." His voice sounded like it had spent too long underwater. I took a careful step closer. "Do you need help?" He laughed softly. "That's what I asked them too." My skin prickled. "Asked who?" "The harbor." He finally looked at me. His eyes were wrong, clouded like glass left in the sun. "It doesn't take," he said. "It trades." Then he was gone. Not walking away. Not jumping. Just gone. I ran to the edge of the pier, heart hammering, scanning the water. Nothing moved. No splash. No ripple. The surface was smooth as oil. The next morning, I checked missing persons reports at the library. The man from the pier wasn't listed, but his face was in an old newspaper photo from 1982. Crewman. Lost at sea. Presumed drowned. After that, my sense of time started slipping. I'd glance at my watch and lose half an hour standing still. Logs didn't match my memory. I'd find entries written in my handwriting that I didn't remember making. Notes about tides I hadn't checked, warnings scrawled in the margins. "Don't stay too long. It counts the hours." Neighbors began avoiding me. Conversations stopped when I walked into stores. An older woman slipped a scrap of paper into my pocket without looking at me. "Leave before it finishes counting." I tried. I really did. I called in sick one night. Turned off my phone. Stayed home with all the lights on. The silence inside my apartment felt wrong, stretched thin like plastic wrap about to tear. At 2:17 a.m., my radio crackled on the kitchen counter. I hadn't brought it home. "Shift's not over," the harbor whispered. Water dripped from my sink. From my ceiling. From my walls. I went back the next night. The docks were crowded. That's the only word for it. Figures stood at the edges of the piers, half hidden by fog. Men and women in work coats, boots fused to the planks, faces blurred like reflections in disturbed water. None of them moved. All of them watched me. I heard murmurs ripple through them as I passed. "He's still here. He's late. He owes." At Pier 9, the water surged higher than ever before, slapping against the boards with purpose. Shapes pressed up from beneath the surface, stretching it thin. My radio screamed. "Don't answer. It learns you. Too many hours." I dropped it and ran. Behind me something climbed. Not fast. Never fast. It didn't need to be. And as I reached the guard office, heart splitting my chest, I understood the truth too late. The harbor wasn't hunting me. It was closing the books. The fog swallowed the harbor whole. Not drifted in, closed. Like a door sealing shut behind me. I stood at the edge of Pier 9, lungs burning, heart pounding so hard I thought it might draw attention to itself. The figures along the docks hadn't followed. They didn't need to. They knew where this ended. The water below surged, thick and slow, folding in on itself. The surface bulged upward as if something underneath was testing the weight of the world above it. I backed away. The pier groaned. Lights flickered. One by one, the harbor lamps died, their reflections snapping out of existence until only moonlight remained, thin, pale, and trembling on the black water. My radio screamed from the ground where I dropped it. Voices poured out in layers, overlapping, arguing. "He's past due. Not finished. Too aware. Let it speak." "Stop," I whispered. The water rose. It didn't surge forward. It assembled itself, pulling upward, dragging mass and memory with it. Something unfolded from the harbor like a shape remembering how to exist. It climbed the pilings without touching them. Not hands. Not feet. Pressure. The thing hauled itself onto the pier, water cascading off it in sheets. Its surface rippled constantly, faces forming and dissolving. Men in oilskins, women in dock coats, eyes hollowed by salt and time. All of them watching me. All of them measuring. I stumbled backward, slipping on wet planks, palms scraping wood. The pier felt alive beneath me. Flexing, tightening, trying to hold me still. "You stayed," the thing said. Its voice wasn't one sound. It was many, speaking in agreement. "You listened." "I didn't agree to this," I said, my voice breaking. The thing leaned closer. The air went cold. Water dripped from its mouth, pooling at my knees. "Agreement is not required," it said. "Time is." Behind me, footsteps. I turned. Mark stood at the far end of the pier, soaked to the bone, eyes empty and resigned. He looked smaller than I remembered. Worn down. Used up. "You have to leave," I shouted. It's here." He nodded slowly. "I know." "Then help me." Mark shook his head. "Someone always asks that." The thing shifted. Faces rearranged. One of them looked like Mark, older, bloated, hollow-eyed. "Ledger's short," the thing said. "Storm's coming. Trade must balance." "I've already given enough," I said. The thing tilted its head. "You gave silence," it replied. "You gave listening. You gave nights." The pier shuddered as the water surged higher, flooding the planks. My boots filled instantly, cold biting into my skin. Mark stepped closer. "I tried to leave once," he said quietly. "Didn't work. Harbor doesn't forget who it counts." "What happens if I go?" I asked. He didn't answer. The thing leaned down until its surface brushed my face. I smelled rust. Old nets. Decades of storms trapped in one breath. "We do not drown," it whispered. "We replace." The world warped. The pier stretched impossibly long. The guard office flickered in and out of sight like a bad memory. The fog pressed inward, heavy and suffocating, carrying the sound of tapping wood, counting. Tap. Pause. Tap. I screamed and ran. Doors opened ahead of me, sheds unfolding into corridors that shouldn't exist. Nets hung like curtains, brushing my face, whispering as I passed. Time skipped. I was suddenly farther than I should have been, closer than I wanted. The harbor chased me without moving. Voices filled my head. Arguments, bargains, confessions. "I'll stay one more shift. Just until the storm passes. I need the money." I burst into the guard office and slammed the door. It locked. For one perfect second, silence returned. Then the walls began to sweat. Water seeped from the corners, pooling at my feet. The lights flickered, buzzing violently. Papers lifted from the desk, spinning slowly in the air. The tide chart slapped against the wall. The numbers changed. Hours added themselves. The radio crackled back to life on the desk. "You can still finish," it said gently. "Just a little longer." "No," I whispered. The floorboards buckled. The door behind me dissolved into mist as the thing forced itself inside. Not fully, not physically, but present. The room felt crowded, air thick with pressure and memory. Mark appeared in the doorway. "This is how it ends," he said. "No," I said again, louder this time. "This is how it cheats." I grabbed the ledger, the physical one, old and forgotten in the filing cabinet. Names. Shifts. Dates going back generations. I tore it open. The thing reacted instantly. The room shook. "Do not." I ripped the pages out. Names scattered like dead leaves. The thing screamed. Not in pain. In loss. Faces peeled away from its surface, howling as they dissolved back into water and fog. The harbor groaned, tides surging violently. "You erase balance," it roared. "I stop counting," I shouted back. The water rushed in. It wasn't a wave. It was a collapse. The pier shattered. The office imploded. Time folded inward, crushing moments together. I felt myself pulled under, down through freezing dark, voices clawing at me, trying to anchor me in the ledger again. Hands gripped my legs. Not hands. Hours. I screamed until water filled my mouth. Then, stillness. I woke to the sound of gulls. That alone felt wrong. For a long moment, I didn't open my eyes. I waited for the damp pressure in my chest, the weight of water, the voices counting inside my skull. I waited to feel the harbor pulling at me again. Nothing happened. When I finally looked, I was lying on cold sand just beyond the breakwater. Dawn bled slowly into the sky, pale and tired, like it didn't want to be there. My clothes were soaked stiff with salt, my hands raw and bleeding from splintered wood. Behind me, Barrows Reach Harbor sat perfectly still. No fog, no moving tides, no sound. The piers were intact. Too intact. Not a single board out of place. Pier 9 stood straight and clean, as if nothing had ever climbed out of the water there. They told me later I'd been found just before sunrise. A jogger. No sign of an accident. No damage reported at the harbor. No missing equipment. No missing people. No ledger. I asked about Mark. No one knew who I meant. I stayed in town for 3 days after that, trying to convince myself I was still real. People spoke to me politely, distantly, the way you talk to someone who won't be staying long. The harbor workers avoided my eyes. When I asked about late shifts, they laughed. "We close up before dark," one of them said. "Always have." That night, I dreamed of pages dissolving in water. Names washing away, but not disappearing. Just sinking deeper, settling somewhere unseen. I left Barrows Reach on the 4th morning. Inland, the air felt thin, empty. I kept waking at night, heart racing, convinced I'd overslept, convinced someone was waiting for me to clock in. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I still hear tapping. Tap. Pause. Tap. It comes from sinks, from pipes, from the inside of walls. Always slow. Always patient. I don't answer. I check the time obsessively now. I never stay late. I leave rooms before the lights turn off. I keep moving, afraid that stillness might count as staying. But every so often, usually just before sleep, I feel it. A pressure behind my eyes. A sense of being measured. As if somewhere, deep beneath water that no longer moves, something is rebuilding its books. Not angry. Not rushed. Just waiting for someone else to work late. And listen.